England, the 16th October 1818. By the time the Duke of Stoneleigh was announced at Hatherall House, Clarissa Hatherall had already been warned 3 times not to contradict him. The first came from her father, the second from Lady Hatherall as the candles were lit, and the third in a whisper close to Clarissa's ear. Don't debate him, don't correct him, and for heaven's sake, don't make his grace uncomfortable. Clarissa had answered with the mildest nod she could manage. At 31, she had perfected the expression of a woman who had heard a command without promising obedience. Then the footman opened the drawing-room doors, and Alfred Balfour, Duke of Stoneleigh, entered as though every room had been built with the expectation of receiving him. He was too severe for prettiness, too composed for charm. His dark evening coat fit without ornament. His cravat was exact, and his expression suggested that he had long ago stopped wondering whether other people approved of him. "Your Grace, you honor us," Sir Benjamin said. Alfred inclined his head. "You've invited me often enough, Sir Benjamin." I began to fear refusal was becoming discourteous. A ripple of obedient laughter passed through the room. Clarissa looked down at her gloves. The Duke noticed. She knew he noticed because, when she lifted her eyes again, his were already on her. Dinner began with all the ceremony her father could purchase and all the ease he could not. Sir Benjamin placed Alfred at his right hand. Lady Hatherall arranged the conversation as carefully as the silver, guiding every subject toward one on which the Duke could be admired. Roads, tenant discipline, the Prince Regent's taste, agricultural improvement. On each matter, Alfred spoke with the brisk confidence of a man accustomed to decisions surviving contact with lesser opinions. Clarissa said nothing. She watched Sir Benjamin agree before Alfred finished. She watched Gertrude laugh half a breath before anyone else. She watched Mr. Wexford, who had argued the opposite position on enclosure only a fortnight earlier, murmur that his Grace had expressed the question perfectly. Alfred finally leaned back and regarded the table with dry amusement. "Extraordinary. I'd been told Kent contained opinions." Sir Benjamin laughed. "Only sensible ones, Your Grace. And they all appear to be mine." Another obedient murmur circled the table. Clarissa felt Gertrude's gaze strike the side of her face. "Do not debate. Do not correct. Do not make him uncomfortable." Alfred lifted his wineglass. "Either I've become wiser than I realized, or your county has achieved a degree of harmony Parliament might envy." Something in Clarissa gave way. Not loudly, not dramatically. It was simply the small internal thread by which she had been holding silence in place. "They don't agree with you, Your Grace." The room stopped. Even the footman, near the sideboard, seemed to become part of the furniture. Alfred lowered his glass. Clarissa could hear the faint tick of the mantel clock behind her. She wished her pulse would do the same and become inaudible. "No?" he asked. Sir Benjamin turned white around the mouth. "Clarissa." She kept her eyes on Alfred. "They have simply learned that disagreement costs more than silence." Gertrude inhaled sharply. "Miss Hatherall." Sir Benjamin's voice hardened. "You'll apologize to His Grace at once." Alfred did not look at him. His attention remained fixed on Clarissa with an intensity that made fear crawl coldly along her spine. "Are you afraid of me, Miss Hatherall?" "Certainly." Her voice remained steady by force alone. "Fear isn't evidence that you are right." For one terrible second, she thought she had mistaken stillness for restraint and would now discover what an offended duke could do to a baronet's daughter with one sentence. Instead, Alfred's mouth changed. It was not the polished smile he had given her father. It was smaller, unwilling and unmistakably real. "No," he said. "It isn't," Sir Benjamin began again. "Your Grace, my daughter has a regrettable habit of—" "Contradicting me?" Alfred asked. "So far, that seems to be the offense. She's embarrassed you. I'll decide when I'm embarrassed." His tone was mild, but the table heard the rank in it. He looked back at Clarissa. "You've contradicted me, Miss Hatherall. You haven't insulted me. There's a difference." Clarissa did not thank him. Gratitude would have made the moment smaller than it was. She merely inclined her head. "I'm relieved your Grace knows it." The genuine smile threatened again, then vanished behind composure. Conversation recovered by degrees, but it never regained its earlier shape. Twice Alfred asked another guest what he truly thought. Once he waited through an uncomfortable pause until an answer came. Clarissa did not flatter herself that one sentence had transformed him. Powerful men often enjoyed novelty when it cost them nothing. Still, when his gaze found hers across the candles, she saw something new there. Not approval. Attention. After dinner, the ladies withdrew, and later the gentlemen joined them in the drawing room. Tea gave way to cards. Sir Benjamin, determined to restore the evening, proposed whist. "A rubber, your Grace. Clarissa's quite competent when she remembers not to be difficult." "Then we must hope she forgets," Alfred said. Gertrude crossed to the small card table and reached for a red Morocco case that Clarissa knew too well. It was narrow, polished from years of handling, with a brass clasp worn pale at the edge. Clarissa's stomach tightened. She had seen that case, opened on evenings, when important men left Hatherall House, smiling more broadly than they had arrived. She had also seen tiny pinpricks on the backs of certain cards. She had never seen who made them. Gertrude's fingers touched the clasp. "Not that pack," Clarissa spoke quietly, but Alfred heard. Gertrude's hand stopped. "Really, Clarissa, must every harmless custom become a matter of principle? Use a fresh pack." "Why?" Alfred asked. Clarissa looked at him. She could not accuse without proof. She would not lie for convenience. "Because I'd prefer it." A pause. Then Alfred gestured toward the unopened pack lying beside the scorecards. "So would I." Gertrude laughed as though nothing had happened and broke the paper on the fresh cards. Clarissa took her seat opposite Alfred. Sir Benjamin's warning pressed between her shoulder blades. "Do not make his Grace uncomfortable." Alfred sorted his hand. "I'm told you're expected to be agreeable tonight." "I've been told many things tonight. And do you intend to obey any of them?" Clarissa studied her cards. Only the rules of whist. His eyes met hers. That same brief, genuine smile appeared. How alarming. She did not deliberately weaken her play. She did not overlook his lead. She did not sacrifice a winning card to preserve his pride. 20 minutes later, Clarissa and her partner took the rubber. Silence followed the final trick. Alfred looked at the cards, then at her. "Miss Hatherall, your Grace, I'm beginning to suspect your family has been protecting me from a great many experiences." "Losing at cards," being answered, honestly. Sir Benjamin's face had gone, rigid. Clarissa gathered the score markers with careful fingers. Alfred rose soon afterward. His leave-taking was faultlessly courteous, but his eyes found Clarissa once more before he crossed the threshold. The look was not warm enough to be called tenderness, and not light enough to be dismissed as amusement. It was recognition. That frightened her more than his arrogance had. When the front door closed and the carriage wheels faded beyond the drive, Sir Benjamin turned the key in the drawing-room door. "Do you understand what powerful men cost a family when they're offended?" Clarissa looked at the empty chair where the Duke had sat, then at the red Morocco case still resting unopened on the side table. "Do you understand what they cost?" she asked softly. "When everyone's afraid to offend them." By 10 o'clock the next morning, Clarissa had learned that one honest sentence could survive the night better than the woman who spoke it. Her father had refused breakfast with her. Lady Hatherall had not. Gertrude sat at the far end of the morning room, turning the pages of a fashion journal without reading a word, while Clarissa answered 3 remarks about ingratitude, 2 about female reputation, and 1 carefully sharpened observation about women who mistook a gentleman's curiosity for admiration. Clarissa endured them because argument would only provide fresh material. What disturbed her was not Gertrude's anger. It was the red Morocco case. Clarissa had gone to the drawing room before breakfast and found it exactly where it had been left the previous evening, on the side table near the card tables, its brass clasp closed. She had not touched it. She knew better. Suspicion was not proof. And in Hatherall House, the difference between the two could be the difference between surviving a conversation and becoming its subject. At 10:30, the footman entered carrying a silver salver. "His Grace, the Duke of Stoneleigh, has called." Gertrude's journal slipped half an inch before she caught it. Clarissa looked up. "Already? Apparently," Gertrude said. "Some men are easily entertained." The insult was soft enough to masquerade as wit. Clarissa rose anyway. "Then I suppose we should try not to disappoint him." Gertrude's eyes narrowed, but the Duke was already being shown in. Alfred entered the morning room without the theatrical weight of the previous evening. Daylight made him less formidable and somehow more dangerous. There were no candles, no formal dinner table, no arrangement of guests to absorb his attention. He greeted Lady Hatherall with exact civility, bowed to Clarissa, and accepted the chair Gertrude indicated. Tea appeared. So did silence. Alfred allowed it to last just long enough to make Gertrude uncomfortable. "I hope I haven't called at an inconvenient hour." "Not at all, Your Grace," Gertrude said quickly. "We're delighted." Alfred glanced toward Clarissa. "Both of you." Clarissa lifted her cup. "I haven't decided yet." His mouth moved at one corner. Gertrude set down the teapot more sharply than necessary. "Clarissa has always considered bluntness a virtue." "No," Clarissa said. "Only accuracy." Alfred looked from stepmother to stepdaughter. "Then perhaps Miss Hatherall can satisfy my curiosity." Gertrude smiled. "Clarissa's curiosity is usually the greater danger." "I asked about mine." The words were not harsh, but they ended the attempted dismissal. Clarissa felt the shift in the room. Alfred had not raised his voice. He had merely refused to let Gertrude decide who was permitted to matter. He turned back to Clarissa. "Was your remark about the red card case another attempt to make me uncomfortable?" "No, you answered that quickly." "It was an easy question. Then I'll try a harder one." His gaze settled on her with unsettling steadiness. "Why didn't you want that pack used?" Clarissa placed her cup in its saucer. Gertrude's fingers tightened around the handle of the sugar tongs. "Your Grace, surely cards are hardly." "Lady Hatherall." Alfred's tone remained courteous. "If Miss Hatherall prefers not to answer, she may tell me so herself." Clarissa met his eyes. He had just done something small and, in her experience, rare. He had given her a refusal before asking for an explanation. "For several years," she said, "certain guests have been encouraged to feel particularly comfortable at cards." Alfred's expression did not change. "Comfortable?" "Successful." Gertrude laughed. "Really, Clarissa? One would think hospitality were a criminal enterprise." "I didn't say it was." Clarissa kept her attention on Alfred. I said some guests were not expected to be pressed too hard. Meaning players sometimes choose not to play as well as they can. You included. Once. Gertrude cut in. Clarissa exaggerates. A woman who takes cards too seriously is hardly attractive company. Clarissa felt heat rise beneath her collar. Before she could answer, Alfred said, "I'm not conducting a survey of attractive company." His gaze remained on Clarissa. "Did you continue?" "No." "Why not?" She looked down at her hands. For one fleeting instant, she could hear her mother's voice, patient and amused, correcting the way Clarissa had once counted a trick too early. Her mother had taught her that a courteous opponent did not humiliate a weaker player, but neither did she falsify the game to flatter him, because my mother taught me that courtesy doesn't require pretending ignorance. Something softened in Alfred's face. A sensible woman. She was. Clarissa reached for her reticule, intending only to occupy her hands. The worn clasp caught against the chair. A small object slipped free and fell onto the carpet between them. Alfred bent before the footman could move. He picked up the little green silk card purse. Its drawstring had frayed at one edge, and the embroidery was faded from years of handling. Clarissa extended her hand. "Thank you." "Yours." "My mother's." Alfred placed it in her palm. His fingertips brushed hers. The contact was slight, accidental, and gone at once, yet Clarissa felt it with absurd clarity. Perhaps because he did. His gaze flickered to her hand before lifting back to her face. Neither mentioned it. Gertrude did. Clarissa keeps old things long after they've lost their usefulness. Clarissa closed her fingers around the purse. Some things aren't valuable because they're new. Alfred looked at the frayed silk, then at Gertrude. Quite. The single word carried no admiration, no pity. Clarissa was unexpectedly grateful for both omissions. Alfred leaned back. "Miss Hatherall, you said some players were expected not to play fully. That is unpleasant. But it doesn't explain why you objected to a particular pack." Clarissa had known the question was coming. She had hoped, foolishly, that it would not. No. Gertrude's shoulders stiffened. Alfred waited. He did not press. That made answering more difficult, not less. Clarissa set the green purse beside her cup. "I've seen marks." Gertrude went still. Alfred's expression sharpened. "What sort of marks?" "Tiny pinpricks. On the backs of certain cards." "How many?" "I don't know." "When did you first see them?" "Months ago." "Did you see anyone make them?" "Did you see anyone use them knowingly?" Clarissa hesitated. "No." Gertrude released a breath. "There, you see, a few imperfections in an old pack, and Clarissa has built a moral crisis around them." Alfred ignored her. "Do you believe the cards were marked deliberately?" Clarissa looked at him. This was the point where another man might have asked what she suspected, and then remembered only what suited him. "I believe the marks are suspicious." "That wasn't my question." "It's my answer." Alfred's brows lifted. Clarissa continued. "I won't accuse someone of cheating because a pattern troubles me. I saw marks. I saw people encouraged to lose gracefully. I didn't see who made the marks, and I didn't see anyone read them during play. That is what I know." The silence that followed was different from the silence at dinner. Yesterday, the room had frozen because Clarissa had violated rank. Today, Alfred was thinking, you'd rather leave part of the story unfinished than make it stronger by guessing. Wouldn't you? For the first time since entering, he looked almost embarrassed. Not deeply, not painfully, just enough to reveal that the question had found a place his certainty had not guarded. "I'm beginning to suspect I don't always." Gertrude rose. "Your Grace, I'm sure you have more important matters than household cards. Alfred stood as well. Possibly, but I've discovered important matters have a habit of hiding inside things everyone calls trivial. His eyes returned to Clarissa. Have you ever seen the cards themselves marked? Clarissa understood that he was asking again, more precisely this time, separating what she had seen from what she had inferred. She appreciated him for it against her better judgment. Yes, she said. I have seen marks, Your Grace. I have never seen who made them. 3 evenings later, Hatherall House was full again, though not grandly enough for anyone to call it an entertainment. Sir Benjamin preferred the phrase informal gathering, which in practice meant 12 guests instead of 40, and just enough candlelight to make modest ambitions look elegant. Clarissa had spent the afternoon arranging flowers, checking the supper list, and listening to Gertrude remind the household that nothing was to appear strained. It was an instruction Clarissa had learned to distrust. Strain did not disappear in Hatherall House. It was merely taught better manners. Alfred arrived shortly after 8. This time no one gasped when he entered, but everyone adjusted. Backs straightened, voices warmed. Mr. Harbury, who had been complaining about drainage on a neighbouring estate, abandoned the subject halfway through a sentence and began praising county improvements instead. Alfred noticed. Clarissa saw it in the slight narrowing of his eyes. Though he said nothing, she had wondered whether their conversation 2 mornings earlier would make him suspicious of every courtesy now. That would have been its own form of arrogance, merely reversed. Instead, he seemed to be watching more carefully, not believing less, looking harder. That distinction mattered to her more than she wanted it to. The red Morocco card case remained in Hatherall House. Clarissa had seen it that afternoon in the same drawer of the drawing-room escritoire where Gertrude usually kept spare packs and scorecards. She had not touched it, neither had she told Alfred where it was kept. He knew only what she had told him, that she had seen suspicious pinpricks on certain cards and had never seen who made them. Tonight, Gertrude chose a plain, unopened pack before anyone could remark upon the matter. Clarissa almost admired the decision. A clever person did not repeat yesterday's mistake in front of the same witness. Supper passed smoothly. Alfred spoke less than he had at the first dinner and listened more. That alone unsettled several people. When Mr. Harbury contradicted him mildly over the condition of a lower road, Alfred did not correct him. He asked how often Harbury travelled it. The gentleman, startled by being invited to elaborate, did so. Clarissa saw Sir Benjamin glance toward Gertrude as though the Duke had violated some private expectation. After supper, the tables were arranged for cards. Clarissa declined the first rubber and took a chair near Aunt Mary, who had been persuaded to attend and was presently engaged in a quiet disagreement with a dowager over whether claret suited cold weather. Alfred joined a table with Mr. Harbury, Sir Benjamin, and Mrs. Denning, a widow whose calm competence at whist had been the subject of family complaint on more than one previous occasion. Gertrude crossed behind Mrs. Denning before play began. Her hand rested lightly on the back of the widow's chair. "My dear," she murmured, too softly for the room at large, but not softly enough for Clarissa, "don't press his grace too hard. He's had an exhausting week." Mrs. Denning looked up, surprised. "At cards?" Gertrude smiled. "At everything. Let him enjoy himself." Clarissa's shoulders tightened. She did not move. She also did not look at Alfred. If he had not heard, she would not make a spectacle from a private whisper. If he had, his response belonged to him. The first few tricks passed. Mrs. Denning played cautiously. Too cautiously. Clarissa had known her for years and had once seen her defeat 3 seasoned gentlemen while discussing a recipe for quince preserves. Tonight, she failed to take a trick Clarissa was certain she could have secured. Alfred's gaze moved from the card on the table to Mrs. Denning's face. On the next hand, the widow hesitated before discarding what Clarissa knew was a stronger card. Alfred said nothing. Then Mrs. Denning made a third uncharacteristic choice, and Alfred laid down his own card. Mrs. Denning. She looked at him. Your Grace, are you playing badly for my benefit? Silence fell around the table. Sir Benjamin gave a strained laugh. Surely not. Mrs. Denning flushed. I wouldn't say badly. Alfred's brows rose. That's an admirably diplomatic distinction. Gertrude intervened from behind him. His Grace is teasing. I'm trying not to. Alfred's voice remained even. He looked at Mrs. Denning again. Play as you ordinarily would. She glanced toward Gertrude. The glance lasted less than a second. Alfred saw it. Clarissa knew he saw it because his face became still in precisely the way it had when she first mentioned marked cards. Mrs. Denning returned her attention to the table. Very well, Your Grace. The game changed immediately. She won the next 2 tricks cleanly. Alfred lost the rubber. He accepted the result without a trace of irritation. But when he rose, his gaze found Clarissa across the room. There was no smile this time, only recognition of a fact neither of them needed to announce. Gertrude had asked someone to soften herself around him. Clarissa had not imagined it. Later, while fresh tea was being poured, Clarissa stood near the mantel with Aunt Mary when Mr. Harbury approached Sir Benjamin at the far side of the room. Clarissa had no intention of listening until she heard Alfred's title. I'll confess, Hatherall, I was surprised, Harbury said. I had understood. His Grace was firmly in favor of the arrangement. Sir Benjamin lowered his voice, but not enough. I wouldn't say firmly. His Grace and I have spoken privately. I have his particular confidence. Harbury seemed impressed. Then perhaps I've been overcautious. You needn't be. Stoneleigh understands the advantage perfectly well. Clarissa felt cold settle beneath her ribs. She did not know what arrangement they meant. She did not know whether Sir Benjamin was exaggerating a casual opinion, inventing private approval, or referring to a real conversation she had never heard. She knew only the words he had used, particular confidence. Stoneleigh understands. Harbury needn't be cautious. She turned away before her father could notice her listening. Alfred was standing near the card table, speaking to Mrs. Denning. Clarissa waited until their conversation ended. Then she approached with deliberate calm. Your Grace. He looked at her. Miss Hatherall. May I tell you something without telling you what I think it means? One corner of his mouth moved. That sounds almost restful. She ignored the flicker of warmth his humor caused. I heard Mr. Harbury speaking with my father. Alfred's amusement disappeared. Clarissa continued carefully. Mr. Harbury said he had understood you supported some arrangement. My father told him that you and he had spoken privately and that he possessed your particular confidence. He then said you understood the advantage and that Mr. Harbury needn't be cautious. Alfred's expression hardened. What arrangement? I don't know. Did your father say I had approved it? Not in those words. Did Harbury? He said he had understood you were firmly in favor. My father corrected firmly, but not the impression of support. Alfred looked toward Sir Benjamin, who was laughing with 2 gentlemen near the fire. Clarissa watched anger gather in him. Then, unexpectedly, he did nothing. He did not cross the room. He did not summon Harbury. He did not demand an explanation in front of guests. His restraint was so deliberate she could almost see the decision being made. "You think he's using my name," he said. Clarissa shook her head. "I told you what I heard." His eyes returned to hers. "You won't even give me the conclusion." "Not when I don't know enough to deserve one." For a moment Alfred simply studied her. The room around them moved in polished fragments. Cards were shuffled, porcelain touched saucers. Sir Benjamin laughed again. "Most people," Alfred said quietly, "would make a story stronger if they believed it helped them. Then perhaps most people value being believed more than being correct. And you? I'd prefer both, but if I have to choose, I'd rather leave something unfinished than finish it falsely." Something in his face changed, not into softness exactly, but into respect without amusement. "Then perhaps I've been lending your father something more valuable than money without knowing it." Clarissa's gaze moved briefly toward Sir Benjamin. "Your name?" "My apparent confidence." Alfred looked across the room where Mrs. Denning had resumed playing at her real ability and had just defeated another gentleman's contract, and perhaps the belief that knowing me means speaking for me. He glanced back at Clarissa. "I won't confront him tonight." She had not asked him to wait. The fact that he chose to do so mattered. "Why not?" "Because you gave me evidence, not certainty." His mouth tightened faintly. "I'm attempting to learn the difference." Clarissa felt an answering pull of reluctant admiration, not because a duke had believed her, because he had listened closely enough to understand what she had not claimed. "Then you're already improving, Your Grace." Alfred's eyes warmed. "Careful, Miss Hatherall. Someone may accuse you of encouraging me." Across the room, Sir Benjamin looked toward them and stopped smiling. Westacre Hall did not resemble a house ruled by hesitation. Clarissa noticed that before the carriage had fully stopped beneath the stone portico on the afternoon of the 23 October. The drive had been swept clean of fallen leaves, the servants moved without visible confusion, and even the footman who opened the door appeared to know precisely how long a guest ought to be allowed to gather her skirts before assistance became fussing. Lady Hatherall approved of such efficiency at once. Aunt Mary, who had accompanied them and who distrusted perfection on principle, murmured that a household so well ordered probably hid its chaos in more expensive rooms. Clarissa nearly smiled. Alfred received them in a drawing-room overlooking the south lawn. He greeted Gertrude with the formal ease due a baronet's wife, bowed to Aunt Mary, and then looked at Clarissa for one fraction longer than courtesy required. Nothing in his expression suggested the intimacy of conspiracy. Nothing suggested he had forgotten it either. "Miss Hatherall," he said, "Your Grace. I'm told Westacre has survived 3 days without your correction. How brave of it." Aunt Mary made a small sound into her glove that might have been a cough. Alfred's mouth curved. Gertrude did not. Tea was brought almost immediately. The conversation began with estate matters, then moved to weather, roads, and the harvest. Alfred answered questions easily, but Clarissa noticed something that had not been true at Hatherall House. He asked almost as many as he answered. When Aunt Mary disagreed with him about the usefulness of a new gravel mixture on winter drives, he did not dismiss her. He asked where she had seen it fail. When Gertrude declared that a tenant was happiest when directed firmly, Alfred asked whether she meant happy or obedient. Gertrude laughed. "Surely, Your Grace, in a properly managed household those things often coincide." "Do they?" Alfred glanced at Clarissa. I suspect Miss Hatherall has an opinion. Gertrude's smile tightened. Clarissa always has one. Then we are fortunate. Clarissa set down her cup. Only if your grace intends to hear it. That seems to be the dangerous portion. His tone was light, but the answer was not. He had arranged for the ladies to be shown a newly refurbished morning room after tea, and the brief walk through the east corridor gave Clarissa a clearer sense of the man behind Westacre's polish. Nothing seemed accidental. Ledgers had their shelves. Servants had defined duties. Even the firewood stacked near the side entrance had been measured into orderly lengths. Alfred found Clarissa studying the symmetry. You disapprove? I haven't said anything. You've developed a very eloquent silence. That seems unfair from a man who once mistook silence for agreement. He stopped beside a tall window overlooking the kitchen garden. Gertrude and Aunt Mary had moved several paces ahead with the housekeeper. They remained plainly in sight, close enough for propriety and too far for every low word to carry. Alfred looked toward the ordered paths below. My father would have hated this. Clarissa heard the change in his voice before she understood the sentence. The wit had thinned. The garden? The arrangement. He folded his hands behind his back. He disliked deciding anything that might displease someone. Repairs were delayed because two stewards disagreed. Tenants received different answers depending on which day they called. Servants learned that asking twice could produce a kinder instruction than asking once. Clarissa said nothing. Alfred gave a humorless breath that was almost a laugh. By the time I inherited, uncertainty had become a method of government. And you corrected it. I abolished it. The distinction was too deliberate to miss. I made decisions quickly. I made them clearly. I discovered that people are enormously grateful when someone is willing to choose a direction. Until the direction is wrong. He turned his head. There it is. What? The part everyone else politely leaves unsaid. Clarissa looked at him. Perhaps because you make saying it feel like an examination. Do I? Yes. He did not defend himself. That surprised her more than if he had laughed. I came to think certainty itself was a kind of leadership, he said after a moment. Perhaps because indecision had done so much damage here. Clarissa considered the immaculate garden below. Certainty is useful only until everyone begins protecting it from facts. Alfred became very still. No anger came, no quick answer either. He looked at the clipped hedges, the straight gravel paths, the servants crossing the yard with practiced efficiency. You believe that's what happens around me. I believe it can. Because of my rank. Because of your rank, your temper, your confidence, and the fact that you're often right. His brows lifted. You make that sound like another defect. It can be. A man who is wrong half the time expects correction. A man who is right 9 times out of 10 begins to regard the 10th objection as impertinence. For several seconds, Alfred said nothing. Then Gertrude called back to ask whether they were joining the others. In a moment, he replied. His gaze remained on Clarissa. You're remarkably comfortable describing my faults in my own house. I'm not comfortable at all. The honesty escaped before she could soften it. Alfred's expression changed. Not amusement this time. Something quieter. No, he said. I suppose you aren't. They rejoined the others. In the morning room, the housekeeper explained that a north window had been replaced after repeated drafts. Alfred remarked that the old frame had been badly set from the beginning. Clarissa looked at the joinery. I don't think it was. Everyone turned toward her. Gertrude's eyes flashed warning. Alfred merely asked, Why? Clarissa stepped no closer than propriety allowed and pointed toward the lower sash. The original frame was square. The stone has settled slightly at that corner. The draft probably developed later. Alfred frowned at the window. The mason told me the frame was poorly fitted. Then perhaps he was protecting his wall. Aunt Mary coughed again. This time there was no mistaking the suppressed laugh. Alfred examined the sill, then looked toward the housekeeper. Was the crack in the stone there before the new frame? Yes, Your Grace. I believe it was noted last winter. A beat passed. Gertrude seemed almost to brace herself for Alfred to rescue his own dignity. He did not. He looked at Clarissa. You are right. The words were simple. They struck her with absurd force. Compliments she could resist. Praise often carried expectation. This did not. He had been wrong. She had corrected him. Nothing broke. No one was punished. Clarissa became aware that she had forgotten to breathe normally. Alfred noticed that too, though he had the grace not to smile. Later, when the visit was drawing to its proper close, Gertrude lingered over her gloves while Alfred spoke briefly with Aunt Mary. He appears very taken with contradiction now, she murmured. Clarissa looked at her. Perhaps he's taken with accuracy. Don't mistake novelty for preference. Clarissa felt the sting and let it pass. Across the room, Alfred had turned toward her. Miss Hatherall, before you go. Gertrude's hand paused. Alfred continued, I've begun reviewing several conversations in which your father referred to my views. I've also asked my secretary to note where my name may have been used without a written instruction. Clarissa's pulse sharpened. Have you found anything? Something. The warmth vanished from his face. A gentleman changed his position on a private county matter after Sir Benjamin assured him that I would view the matter favorably. Had you said that? No. Gertrude went utterly still. Alfred looked from her to Clarissa. And that, Miss Hatherall, is a fact I intend not to protect with certainty. By the afternoon of the 27th October, Clarissa had begun to understand that a dangerous truth did not become safer merely because two people agreed to handle it carefully. The evidence remained painfully incomplete. The red Morocco card case was still at Hatherall House, untouched by her. Alfred had discovered that at least one gentleman had altered his conduct after Sir Benjamin claimed the Duke would view the matter favorably. Yet, some could say how many such claims had been made, what advantage her father had sought each time, or whether the marked cards had ever been used as more than a means of manufacturing agreeable evenings. That uncertainty should have comforted Clarissa. Instead, it made every ordinary exchange in her father's house feel suspect. A compliment seemed capable of hiding a bargain. A card table could become a stage. Even laughter began to sound rehearsed. Aunt Mary had been invited to Westacre Hall for tea, and Gertrude had accepted the invitation with suspicious sweetness, announcing that reconciliation between neighboring families was always desirable. Clarissa knew better than to trust the word reconciliation when no quarrel had been publicly admitted. Still, the presence of Aunt Mary made the visit proper, and the drawing-room at Westacre offered something Hatherall House had not given her in years, the sense that speaking might lead somewhere other than punishment. Alfred waited until Gertrude and Aunt Mary had become occupied with a portfolio of estate sketches before approaching the window where Clarissa stood. He did not crowd her, he merely took the place at a respectful distance beside the long table on which correspondence had been arranged for the secretary's later attention. I've confirmed something, he said quietly. Clarissa's fingers tightened around the edge of her reticule. About my father, about myself first. She looked at him. That sounds ominous. It's merely unfashionable. His expression remained grave. I've found no written instruction, message, or memorandum in which I authorized Sir Benjamin to represent my opinion on that county matter. I've also spoken with the gentleman involved. He believed your father had my approval because Sir Benjamin told him I regarded the arrangement favorably. Clarissa felt the familiar chill beneath her ribs. And did you? No. Had you discussed it at all? Casually. Months ago. I said the matter sounded practical if the parties concerned found the terms fair. That was the entirety of my wisdom, and my father turned that into support. It appears so. Alfred's jaw tightened. He also referred to my particular confidence. Clarissa looked toward Gertrude. Her stepmother was smiling at something. Aunt Mary had said, but Clarissa knew that smile well enough to see the attention beneath it. Then he used more than your name. Yes, Alfred's voice lowered. He used the impression that proximity to me gave him authority. Clarissa hated how neatly the pieces fit. The softened card games, the careful dinners. The guests encouraged to leave pleased with themselves and pleased with the Duke. Her father had spent years cultivating the appearance of friendship with powerful men, because appearance itself could be converted into influence. She had seen the beginning of the machinery and told herself she was not responsible because she refused to turn the wheel. People may have made real decisions because of it, she said. They may have. Money, possibly, introductions, support, credit, social confidence. I don't yet know. Clarissa looked down. Then I should have spoken earlier. Alfred did not answer immediately. She almost wished he would give her the easy comfort everyone offered. When discomfort became inconvenient, you could not have known. You are not responsible. None of this belongs to you. He did not. How much did you know? He asked. She met his eyes. That Gertrude sometimes told people to play below their ability. That I had been told to do the same. That there were strange marks on some cards. That my father preferred important guests to leave pleased. Did you know he was representing himself as speaking with my authority? No. Did you know anyone had changed a financial or county decision because of that belief? No. Did you mark cards? No. Did you knowingly use marked cards to deceive a guest? No. Did you continue underplaying when asked? Not after the first time. His gaze remained steady. Then don't borrow guilt from facts you didn't possess. Clarissa's throat tightened. That sounds dangerously close to absolution. It isn't. Alfred's answer came at once. You're responsible for what you knew and what you chose, not for what you didn't know, simply because hindsight has made the pattern obvious. The distinction unsettled her because it was less comforting and more respectful than forgiveness she had not requested. And what if I knew enough to be suspicious? Then perhaps you should have asked more questions. He paused, or spoken sooner. Clarissa flinched inwardly, though his tone held no accusation. Alfred noticed. You wanted honesty. I do, even when it's unpleasant, especially then. Good. He glanced briefly toward the other women, then back to her. Because I won't make you innocent by pretending you had no choices. That would be another way of refusing to see you clearly. Clarissa stared at him. Compliments had never reached her like that. Neither had protection. He was offering neither. He was offering the far rarer courtesy of moral proportion. You make being comforted remarkably difficult, Your Grace. A faint smile touched his mouth. I've been accused of worse. Frequently, I imagine. With increasing courage, she almost laughed. The sound caught before it escaped, replaced by a breath that trembled more than she intended. Alfred's expression changed at once. Clarissa. It was the first time he had used her Christian name, very softly. Not as possession, not as presumption. The intimacy of it startled them both. He corrected himself with visible care. Miss Hatherall. She looked away toward the rain-silvered windows. I keep thinking of Mrs. Denning. Why? Because when Gertrude told her not to press you too hard, she obeyed. Not because she feared the cards, because she feared appearing rude. Perhaps that was all the system needed. No threats, no commands anyone could prove. Just enough pressure that people chose what was expected. Alfred said nothing. Clarissa continued, and I understood that language. I grew up inside it. I knew what it meant when Gertrude said, "A gentleman ought to leave pleased." I knew what it meant when my father told me not to embarrass important guests. I told myself refusing to cooperate was sufficient. Her hands had gone cold. She clasped them together. It doesn't feel sufficient now. Alfred looked at her hands, then at her face. He did not move closer. May I? Clarissa knew exactly what he meant, though he had not reached for her. The question itself seemed to still the room. She gave a small nod. Alfred extended one hand between them, palm slightly upward, giving her every opportunity to refuse even after agreeing. Clarissa placed her gloved fingers lightly against his. He turned his hand with measured care and rested it over hers. Nothing more. The contact was warm, deliberate, and restrained. Yet because he had asked, because he waited, because he did not pretend the gesture solved anything, it carried a tenderness far greater than the accidental brush over her mother's green silk purse days before. Clarissa let herself remain still beneath his hand. "You should have spoken sooner," Alfred said quietly. "Perhaps I should have listened sooner." She lifted her gaze. "Those are not the same failing." No, his thumb did not move, his grip did not tighten, but they can belong in the same room without one erasing the other. For several breaths neither spoke. Then Gertrude's voice floated across the drawing room. "Clarissa, Aunt Mary was just saying we ought to leave before the road worsens." Alfred withdrew his hand immediately. No lingering claim. No attempt to make the moment secret by stretching it beyond propriety. Clarissa turned. Gertrude was watching them. Her smile was elegant. Her eyes were not. The carriage ride home passed under grey skies. Gertrude waited until Aunt Mary had been delivered to her own residence before speaking, only when the carriage door closed again. And Clarissa sat opposite her stepmother did the sweetness disappear. "You've been discussing this family with His Grace." Clarissa met her gaze. "I've been discussing what I know. How virtuous. I didn't say it was." Gertrude leaned back. "If you insist on telling His Grace how this family behaves, perhaps he should also be told how long you knew." Clarissa felt the threat immediately. Clear as a card turned face up on the table, Gertrude smiled again. "After all, my dear, honesty should be complete." 3 days later, Clarissa discovered that Gertrude's warning had done something far worse than frighten her. It had made concealment feel impossible. The morning of the 30th of October passed beneath a weight of unspoken accusation. At breakfast, Sir Benjamin spoke only of weather post and an upcoming supper at Westacre Hall. Lady Hatherall discussed ribbons with exaggerated ease. No one mentioned the Duke. No one mentioned the cards. That silence was more deliberate than any argument. Clarissa carried it with her through the afternoon, until she, Aunt Mary, and Gertrude joined a small round of calls in the neighbouring district. By the time the carriage turned toward Hatherall House, Gertrude had accepted an invitation to stop briefly at another acquaintance's home, leaving Clarissa and Aunt Mary to complete the final portion of the journey with Alfred, who had offered to accompany them from Westacre after meeting them there. The arrangement remained entirely proper. Aunt Mary sat opposite Clarissa, wrapped in a dark pelisse, and apparently absorbed in the passing hedgerows. Alfred occupied the place beside her aunt, giving Clarissa both distance and attention. Rain had softened the road without making it dangerous. The carriage moved steadily, wheels hissing through damp gravel. Clarissa had known, since the moment Alfred took his seat, that she could not continue giving him fragments. Gertrude had been right about one thing: honesty that protected Clarissa from embarrassment, while leaving out the part that damaged her was not honesty. It was strategy. Alfred studied her for several minutes before speaking. "You've been unusually quiet." Clarissa looked toward the window. "I've been accused of worse." "By me?" "Not yet." "Then I'll try to preserve the novelty." Aunt Mary glanced at him, then at Clarissa. "I believe I shall inspect Kent." Alfred blinked, from inside a carriage, with great concentration. She turned toward the opposite window. "You may both pretend I've become deaf." Clarissa nearly smiled, but the expression did not last. She folded her hands in her lap. "Gertrude said something after we left Westacre." Alfred's face sharpened. "What?" "She said that if I insisted on telling you how my family behaves, I should also tell you how long I knew." He waited. No defense, no invitation to blame Gertrude. Just silence. Clarissa drew a breath. "She's right." Alfred's brows drew together. "About what?" "About the fact that I knew more than I've told you." The carriage seemed suddenly smaller. Aunt Mary did not turn from the window. Clarissa forced herself to continue. "Not about my father using your name. I didn't know that until recently. Not about specific favors or county decisions, but the card evenings began years ago after my mother died." Alfred remained still. "Go on." "Gertrude decided I was too competitive." The word tasted childish beside the consequences. "She said gentlemen did not enjoy women who made them look foolish. At first, she only told me to play more gently with important guests. Then she became clearer." Clarissa looked at her gloves. "She told me to underplay." Alfred's expression hardened, though not toward her. "And you did, once." The admission left her chest tight, perhaps twice. Depending on what one counts as deliberate restraint, I remember holding back a winning card, because she had warned me before supper that Sir Edwin disliked being contradicted in anything. I told myself it was politeness, and afterward, I hated it. Her voice came out quieter, not because I lost, because I had made the result false. Alfred said nothing. Clarissa continued. "My mother taught me whist. She used to say that kindness meant not humiliating a weaker player, but respect meant allowing him to play the game he had actually chosen. After she died, I began hearing the opposite. That a woman should soften herself, that important men should leave pleased, that a house gained more from admiration than accuracy. So you stopped. Eventually. How? I refused to sit down when certain instructions were given. I claimed headaches. I chose embroidery. Later, I simply said no. A faint bitterness entered her voice. That earned me the reputation of being difficult. Alfred's mouth tightened. Convenient? Very. She looked at him now, but refusing was not the same as speaking. He did not interrupt. I knew Gertrude sometimes asked others to underplay. I saw it happen. I suspected the red pack was marked long before I told you. I saw the pinpricks months ago. I never saw who made them, and I never saw anyone openly read them during play. But I knew enough to understand that something about those evenings was dishonest. Alfred leaned back slightly. Did you ever use the marked pack knowingly? No. Did you mark the cards? No. Did you know your father was later invoking my supposed confidence? No. Did you know anyone altered a decision because of that? No. Then what are you confessing to? Clarissa looked at him. Silence. The word sat between them. I told myself that because I would not cheat, I was clean. Because I would not flatter, I was separate from it. Because I never repeated my father's claims, I was not responsible for what he did with them. Her throat tightened, but I understood the atmosphere. I understood why people behaved differently. I saw women reduce themselves and men grow more certain. I knew something false was being cultivated. I simply chose not to be the one who challenged it. Aunt Mary's head turned slightly, though she still looked toward the rain-streaked glass. Alfred's voice softened. Why? Clarissa swallowed. Because I was tired. That answer shamed her more than fear would have. Because every objection became a family offense. Because Gertrude could turn a sentence into evidence that I was jealous or bitter. Because my father would tell me I was damaging his prospects, his friendships, his standing. Because I learned that if I refused privately, I could still sleep at night and eat breakfast in peace. Alfred looked down at his hands. And now I'm not certain peace, earned that way, deserves the name. The carriage rocked gently over a rut. Alfred said, You should have spoken sooner. Clarissa flinched, though she had expected it. He did not withdraw the words. Yes, and I should have listened sooner. She shook her head. Those aren't the same failing. No, his gaze met hers. But they may belong to the same world. He rested one hand on his knee, palm turned upward, not reaching, offering. Clarissa looked at it. The gesture was so simple that it unsettled her more than reassurance would have. You don't have to, he said. I know. She placed her hand in his. Alfred's fingers closed around hers with measured care. He did not squeeze. He did not pull her nearer. He merely held her hand as the carriage moved through the wet Kent afternoon. Aunt Mary continued her heroic study of the hedgerows. Clarissa felt the warmth of Alfred's palm through her glove, and for several minutes neither of them spoke. It was not rescue. He had not forgiven her into innocence. He had not told her that fear excused everything. He had simply stayed after hearing the part she least wanted him to know. Clarissa tightened her fingers around his. Alfred looked at their joined hands, then back at her face. You know what worries me most? She asked. Tell me. That Gertrude knows exactly where to strike now. Alfred's expression cooled. Because you admitted your silence. Because it is true. Truth can be used dishonestly. Yes. She looked toward Aunt Mary. And if she tells others before I do, it will sound like confession to something larger. Alfred's thumb remained still against her glove. Then what do you want from me? The question mattered. Clarissa took her time answering. Nothing yet. He accepted that without argument. Very well. The carriage approached the gates of Hatherall House. Alfred released her hand before the servants could see more than propriety permitted. The absence of his touch was immediate. Aunt Mary finally turned from the window. Kent appears unchanged, she announced. Clarissa managed a small smile. Alfred did not. His eyes were on the house ahead. Your stepmother has accepted the invitation to Westacre on the 4th, he said. Clarissa's stomach tightened. For the supper and cards? Yes. Aunt Mary looked between them. That sounds ominous. Clarissa thought of the red Morocco case sitting somewhere inside Hatherall House, still under Gertrude's control. It might be. Alfred's gaze held hers. Will you come? Clarissa remembered the first time she had remained silent to preserve peace. Then she thought of the hand he had offered without closing around hers until she chose it. "Yes," she said, "I'll come." On the evening of the 4th November, Clarissa knew the moment Gertrude entered Westacre Hall that the supper had already become a contest. The red morocco card case was in her hand, not hidden in a reticule, not carried by a servant. Gertrude held it openly against the dark silk of her gown, as though it were an innocent household object she had chosen to bring for convenience. Clarissa stopped beneath the chandelier in the entrance hall. Sir Benjamin, several steps ahead, was already greeting Alfred with expansive warmth. Aunt Mary stood beside Clarissa and followed her gaze. "Is that the case?" she murmured. "Yes. Did she tell you she meant to bring it?" No. Clarissa's mouth had gone dry. The pack had remained at Hatherall House under Gertrude's control until that evening. Now Gertrude had moved it herself, deliberately, into Alfred's house. The fact settled something in Clarissa. Whatever happened tonight, she would not allow anyone later to claim that she had transported or altered it. Alfred noticed the case when Gertrude approached him. His eyes dropped to it for only a second. "Lady Hatherall, Your Grace, I thought we might save you the trouble of finding cards later." Her smile was composed. "These are familiar favorites." Alfred's expression gave nothing away. How thoughtful. Clarisse could not tell whether Gertrude heard the warning beneath the courtesy. Supper itself was almost painfully civilized. There were 10 guests beyond the Hatheralls and Aunt Mary, enough to make every word public without turning the evening into spectacle. Alfred had seated Clarissa neither beside him nor far from him. He had made no visible attempt to mark her as favored. Yet twice during dinner, she caught him watching the room after a confident statement, as if he had begun measuring not who agreed, but who hesitated before doing so. Once a gentleman offered a different opinion about a tenant dispute. Alfred listened. Nothing terrible occurred. Clarissa saw the gentleman relax afterward, almost embarrassed by his own surprise. It should have encouraged her. Instead, the red case waiting in the drawing room seemed to grow heavier in her imagination. After dinner, when the ladies had withdrawn and the gentleman later joined them, card tables were arranged near the fire. Gertrude crossed the room before the servants could bring out Westaker's own packs. "Since we have all been speaking so much of games lately," she said lightly, "perhaps we should settle this tiresome mystery." Clarissa felt every muscle in her back tighten. Gertrude placed the red morocco case in the center of the nearest table. Conversation thinned. Alfred remained standing beside the mantel. Sir Benjamin's face was carefully blank. Aunt Mary sat very still. "What mystery?" asked Mrs. Denning, who had been invited again and who looked from Gertrude to Clarissa with unease. Gertrude smiled. "My stepdaughter has apparently suggested that our family card evenings are not entirely honorable." "I said no such thing in those words," Clarissa replied. "No?" Gertrude rested 2 fingers on the case. "Then perhaps you'd like to explain what you have said." Alfred did not move. Clarissa knew what Gertrude wanted. Denial would let her expose Clarissa's private admissions as hypocrisy. Anger would make Clarissa appear frightened of examination. Silence would be called guilt. Gertrude had chosen the room well. Clarissa stepped toward the table. "I said that certain guests have been encouraged to play below their ability." A murmur passed among the company. Gertrude lifted her brows. "And how would you know?" Clarissa met her eyes. "Because I was told to do it." Sir Benjamin finally intervened. "Clarissa, this is hardly the place." "You allowed the question." Her father's jaw tightened. Gertrude continued before he could stop her. How many years ago was that? There it was. The blade Clarissa had known was coming. She could feel Alfred's attention on her, but she did not look toward him for rescue. Several. Gertrude turned slightly, so the others could see her surprise. And yet, only now, when His Grace has taken an interest in your opinions, have you discovered your conscience. Aunt Mary made a small sound of protest. Clarissa lifted one hand without looking at her. She wanted no defense that distorted the truth. No, Clarissa said. My conscience was present. My courage was inconsistent. The room became quiet. Gertrude had not expected that answer. Clarissa continued. I knew guests were sometimes asked to underplay. I was asked myself. I complied once, perhaps twice, if one counts deliberate restraint that I chose to call courtesy at the time. I later refused. Mrs. Denning stared at Gertrude. Sir Benjamin's colour deepened. Clarissa forced herself onward. I also saw pinprick marks on certain cards in that case. Gertrude's hand remained on the red leather. And you're accusing me of marking them? No. Your father? No. Then whom? I don't know. Gertrude laughed softly. How convenient. It isn't convenient at all. I wish I knew. Clarissa looked around the room now, refusing to let Gertrude become the only audience. I never saw anyone make the marks. I never saw anyone knowingly use them during play. I did not make them. I did not knowingly use marked cards to deceive anyone. But you knew they existed, Gertrude said. I suspected they were deliberate, and stayed silent. Clarissa swallowed. Yes. The admission struck harder spoken publicly than it had in Alfred's carriage. I should have spoken sooner. Gertrude's smile sharpened. There, at last. No, Alfred's voice cut through the room for the first time. Not loud. Final. Everyone turned toward him. He looked at Clarissa, not Gertrude. Have you told me anything tonight that is untrue? Clarissa's heart beat painfully once. No. Anything different from what you told me privately? No. Then I will neither invent innocence for you nor permit another person to invent guilt. Gertrude's face changed. Your Grace, she's admitted she knew. She has admitted what she knew. Alfred's gaze moved to the red case. Those are not the same sentence. Clarissa felt something inside her steady. He had not declared her blameless. He had not transformed her into a helpless victim because affection required simplicity. He had listened closely enough to preserve the distinction she herself had found painful. Gertrude opened the case. Then let us look. If Clarissa is so precise, perhaps she can explain these. Several cards were visible inside. Clarissa saw the faint marks immediately. Her stomach tightened. Gertrude lifted one between gloved fingers. She recognizes them. You can see it. I recognize the marks, Clarissa said. That proves I have seen them before, nothing more. Sir Benjamin stepped forward. This has gone far enough. I agree, Clarissa said. Her father stared at her. Then stop. Not by putting those cards back into private hands. The words surprised even her. Alfred's attention sharpened. Clarissa looked directly at Gertrude. If the pack is evidence against me, you cannot object to neutral custody. Evidence? Gertrude echoed. You're making this absurd. Then custody should not trouble you. A silence followed. Gertrude glanced at Sir Benjamin. Clarissa saw the calculation pass between them. If they refused, they would appear afraid of the cards. If they agreed, Gertrude likely believed the pack still injured Clarissa most. Very well, Gertrude said. Let His Grace keep them. Alfred shook his head. Not on my word alone. He rang for the steward. We'll wrap the case before witnesses. Sir Benjamin and I will both seal it. Sir Benjamin's face hardened. Is that necessary? Alfred looked at him. If we want no one accused later of altering what is inside, yes. The steward brought heavy paper, cord and sealing wax. Before everyone present, the red morocco case was closed, wrapped and tied. Alfred pressed the Stoneleigh signet into one pool of wax. Sir Benjamin, after a pause too long to be comfortable, pressed his own signet into the second. The steward accepted the packet under Alfred's instruction to place it in the locked strong box at Westacre, until Clarissa or the matter itself required its return. Clarissa watched the packet leave the room. For the first time since she had noticed the pinpricks months ago, she knew exactly where the cards were and who could not secretly change them. Gertrude's voice came coolly behind her. How noble this all sounds. Shall we also seal up your memory, Clarissa, so no one can ask why it took you years to become honest? Clarissa turned. The shame struck because it contained truth. She did not look away. You may ask. Gertrude blinked. I already answered. By the following morning, that answer had been stripped of every distinction. A caller told Aunt Mary that Sir Benjamin was saying his daughter had confessed to cheating at cards. Another acquaintance had heard that Clarissa had participated for years before accusing her family when the Duke noticed her. Alfred sent no grand public denial. Clarissa had not asked for one, yet when she read the second account, she understood Gertrude's strategy completely. Clarissa had confessed her silence. Her family intended to make the county remember only the word confessed. By the 6th of November, Clarissa had learned how quickly a careful truth could be ruined by careless repetition. At breakfast, Lady Hatherall received 2 notes and read neither aloud. Yet the satisfaction in her expression made their contents easy to guess. Sir Benjamin unfolded the Morning Post with the calm of a man who believed public opinion had finally returned to its proper owner. Clarissa sat between them and drank tea she could not taste. No one accused her directly. That would have required admitting the scandal existed. Instead, Gertrude spoke about the danger of female impulsiveness. Sir Benjamin remarked that private family matters became vulgar when carried into public rooms. Clarissa listened until the footman entered with Alfred's card. Her father's hand stopped over the newspaper. Gertrude looked up. Again, Clarissa did not answer. Alfred was shown into the drawing room 10 minutes later. He had not come alone. His secretary remained in the hall with correspondence, and the visit itself was conducted within every boundary propriety demanded. Still, the air changed when Alfred entered. Sir Benjamin's confidence hardened into performance. Gertrude's smile became sweeter. Clarissa felt absurdly relief. Alfred greeted everyone with exact courtesy. He did not look angry. That was almost more alarming. Sir Benjamin, he said, I understand several versions of Tuesday evening are circulating. Her father gave a weary laugh. You know how county gossip behaves, Your Grace. Increasingly. Clarissa spoke emotionally. People have simplified. Clarissa looked at him. Simplified? Sir Benjamin's eyes flashed warning. Alfred's gaze moved to her. What version have you heard? That I confessed to cheating at cards for years. Did you? No? Then it isn't simplification. His tone remained level. It is false. Gertrude spread her hands. Surely no one means to say she dealt false cards herself. Only that she admitted knowledge and participation. Clarissa's voice stayed quiet. I admitted underplaying once, perhaps twice, years ago. I admitted seeing suspicious marks later. I admitted silence. I did not admit using marked cards to cheat. Most people won't bother with such distinctions, Sir Benjamin said. Then most people will be wrong. Clarissa heard the edge in her own voice and did not soften it. Alfred watched her, then turned to her father. "Have you told anyone that I accept your account of the matter?" Sir Benjamin hesitated. It was small. Clarissa saw it. Alfred saw more. "I may have said you understand the family position. I do not." The room went still. Gertrude intervened. "Your Grace, surely you can see what Clarissa's public confession has done to us." "I can see what has been done with it." He looked at Clarissa again. "May I speak with Miss Hatherall?" Sir Benjamin's expression tightened. "With Lady Hatherall present, of course." "Of course." Aunt Mary was sent for as well, having arrived earlier that morning to call on Clarissa. Once she joined them, Sir Benjamin withdrew to his study under the pretense of correspondence. Gertrude remained near the far window, close enough to satisfy propriety and distant enough to pretend disinterest. Alfred took the chair opposite Clarissa. "I can end part of this today." Clarissa looked at him. "How?" "By stating publicly that you did not confess to cheating, and that I have not accepted your father's account." She knew before he finished that she did not want it. Not yet. The answer frightened her because refusing Alfred's protection meant choosing the slower road. "No." His brows lifted. "No, not yet." Gertrude's head turned slightly from across the room. Alfred did not argue. "Why?" Clarissa folded her hands in her lap. "Because if you clear me simply by speaking as Duke, they'll say I traded one powerful story for another. That I'm protecting you because I favor you. Yes. Would that be entirely false?" Heat rose beneath her skin. Alfred's expression changed at once. That was badly phrased. It was. A flicker of rueful humor crossed his face, but he did not hide behind it. "Then let me try again. Do you believe my intervention would weaken your position? For now, even if what I say is true, especially because it would be easy." Clarissa drew a slow breath. "I need people to understand the difference between what I did and what they're saying I did. If your rank settles the matter before the facts do, that difference will disappear again." Alfred studied her. "So, what do you want from me?" The question was familiar now, but it still struck her each time because he meant it. "Nothing publicly." "Privately," Clarissa considered. "Keep the packet secure. Do not let anyone move or open it. And if my father uses your name again, remember exactly what was said." "That I can do." He paused. "Anything else? Believe only what you can prove." The corner of his mouth moved. "You've become severe. I had an excellent teacher." This time, he smiled, briefly, warmly. Then Gertrude crossed the room. "How admirable. Clarissa now manages even ducal conduct." Alfred rose. "No, Miss Hatherall has asked me not to manage hers." Gertrude's face cooled. Clarissa stood as well. "I should speak with my father." Aunt Mary looked at her sharply. "Now?" Yes, Sir Benjamin was in his study, exactly where she expected, standing before the fire with one hand braced against the mantel. He dismissed Alfred's presence from the matter before she mentioned it. "If you have come to repeat His Grace's criticism, spare me. I've come to ask what you have told people, only what is necessary." "That I confessed to cheating." He turned. "You confessed to knowing. That is not the same thing. It is close enough for society." Clarissa felt something inside her settle. "No, it is close enough for you." His face hardened. "This family has a reputation to preserve. Then preserve it without changing my words. Your words damaged it." "My words exposed damage that was already there." He stepped away from the mantel. "You have no idea what I have spent years building." "That is becoming clearer. Do not be impertinent. Then tell me plainly, did you use the Duke's name to persuade people after those card evenings?" "I cultivated relationships. That is what families of consequence do." Did you tell people you had his particular confidence? Sometimes. When he had not given you permission to speak for him. Permission. Sir Benjamin laughed once, without humor. You speak as though influence requires a signed note. Influence may not. Honesty does. Enough. He pointed toward the door. You will tell Lady Hatherall that Tuesday's scene was a misunderstanding. You will say you spoke under emotion and that no one in this family cheated anyone. Clarissa stared at him. You want me to make my confession smaller until your conduct disappears. I want you to behave like a daughter. If being a daughter requires me to lie, then you've defined the role too narrowly. His face changed. You live under my roof, there it was. Not threat exactly, structure. Food, shelter, name, place. Clarissa had spent years feeling the shape of that sentence, even when he did not speak it. Yes, she said. For 2 more days. Sir Benjamin went still. What? I'm leaving. Don't be absurd. I've written to Aunt Mary. She has room. You will not turn yourself into a public spectacle by running away. I'm not running. I'm changing houses. And what will people say? Clarissa looked at him. Something. They always do. He stared at her as though she had become unrecognizable. Perhaps she had. You would leave your family over cards? No. Her voice softened. I'm leaving because every truth here becomes disobedience if it costs you anything. Sir Benjamin's anger faltered for the first time. Clarissa. She did not mistake the change for remorse. It was shock. He had never truly believed she would remove herself from the structure he used to define her duty. I'll leave on the 8th, she said. I'll take only what is mine, and His Grace will provide the carriage, I suppose. No, Alfred had offered nothing. She had asked for nothing. That mattered. Aunt Mary will send hers. When Clarissa returned to the drawing room, Alfred stood near the window, speaking quietly with Aunt Mary. He looked at Clarissa's face and stopped. What happened? I'm leaving Hatherall House. Gertrude inhaled sharply behind her. Alfred's expression sharpened, but he did not move toward Clarissa. Where will you go? To Aunt Mary. Aunt Mary nodded once. She will be welcome. Alfred held Clarissa's gaze. Do you want my carriage? No. Do you want me to speak to your father? No. A pause. Then he inclined his head. Very well. Gertrude stared at him as though he had failed some masculine duty. Clarissa felt the opposite. He had heard no twice in a single morning and treated neither answer as invitation to persuade. Alfred looked at her with quiet gravity. What do you want? Clarissa thought of the sealed packet at Westacre, the rumors beyond the walls, and the house she would leave without knowing whether society would ever believe her. I want the truth to become more inconvenient than the lie. Alfred's eyes held hers. Then, I'll wait until you decide how. On the morning of the 8th November, Clarissa left Hatherall House with 2 trunks, 1 bandbox, a small writing case, and the green silk card purse that had belonged to her mother. She took nothing that could be argued over later. No family silver, no books purchased by her father, no jewelry given by Gertrude. Even the shawl folded across the top of her smaller trunk had been her mother's before it had been hers. Aunt Mary's carriage arrived at 10, precisely as promised. Sir Benjamin did not come downstairs. Gertrude did. She stood in the entrance hall, wearing an expression of controlled sorrow suitable for witnesses. I do hope, she said, that when this little excitement has passed, you won't be too proud to come home. Clarissa fastened her gloves. I'm not leaving because I'm proud. No, I'm leaving because every disagreement here becomes a defect in my character. Gertrude's mouth tightened. People will say you ran to your aunt because you were exposed. People have already said worse. Clarissa glanced toward the staircase. For one brief moment, she wondered whether her father would appear. He did not. The absence hurt more than she wished to admit, but it did not change her decision. "Goodbye, Lady Hatherall." Gertrude flinched at the formality. Clarissa crossed the threshold without looking back. Aunt Mary's house was smaller than Hatherall House and far less impressive. But by the second afternoon, Clarissa understood how much space could exist inside a place where no one monitored the cost of every sentence. Her aunt did not ask for gratitude. She gave Clarissa a bedroom overlooking a bare November garden, told her which bell summoned tea, and left her alone long enough to unpack. Clarissa placed the green silk card purse in the top drawer of the small writing desk. The red Morocco case was nowhere near her. It remained sealed at Westacre Hall under the steward's custody, bearing Alfred's signet and Sir Benjamin's signet exactly as they had left it. That fact gave her more comfort than she expected. On the 9th November, Clarissa began asking questions. Not accusations. Not pleas for loyalty. Questions. Aunt Mary accompanied her in the carriage. Their first call was on Mrs. Denning, who received them in a parlour warm with coal and embarrassment. Clarissa refused tea until the matter was settled. "I don't want you to defend me," she said. Mrs. Denning looked relieved and worried at once. "Then what do you want?" "The truth, even if it is inconvenient to me." She took out a small notebook. "Were you ever asked at Hatherall House to play below your ability?" Mrs. Denning hesitated. "Yes." "By whom?" "Lady Hatherall. More than once. Twice that I remember." "Was the Duke present?" "Once." "Did Sir Benjamin later ask anything of you or your family while referring to his Grace's confidence?" Mrs. Denning thought for several seconds. "Not of me, but my brother received a request concerning an introduction to a gentleman in Maidstone." Sir Benjamin implied Stoneleigh approved of the connection. Clarissa's pulse quickened. "Did your brother act because of that?" "He agreed to make the introduction sooner than he otherwise would have." "Would he say so himself?" "If asked directly, yes." Clarissa wrote only what Mrs. Denning had said. Nothing more. Their second useful account came 2 days later from Mr. Harbury. He had been uneasy since the evening at Hatherall House, and even more uneasy after hearing the rumours. Clarissa asked him the same questions in the same order. "Were you ever requested to play below your ability?" "Not directly," he said. "Lady Hatherall once told my wife that His Grace disliked being pressed at cards." "Did my father later invoke the Duke's supposed confidence?" "Yes." "Did it affect any decision you made?" Harbury looked toward Aunt Mary, then back to Clarissa. "Yes, the admission seemed to cost him something. There was a local subscription matter." "Your father," said His Grace, "considered the arrangement sound. I withdrew an objection because I did not wish to be seen opposing Stoneleigh." Clarissa felt no triumph, only anger sharpened by proof. "Did Alfred say that to you?" Harbury blinked at the use of the Duke's Christian name, though Clarissa had spoken without thinking. She corrected herself at once. "Did His Grace say that to you?" "No." "Did you hear it from anyone except my father?" "No." Clarissa closed the notebook. "Thank you." Harbury looked ashamed. "Miss Hatherall, if you intend to use my name, I should know. I won't use it without asking you first." His relief was immediate. That, too, Clarissa noticed. She had spent weeks thinking only about the courage required to speak. Now she saw the courage required to let others control when their own truth became public. On the return journey, Aunt Mary was unusually quiet. Clarissa finally looked at her. "What is it?" Her aunt watched the hedgerows pass. "You have one more witness." Clarissa waited. Aunt Mary sighed. "Me." You 2 years ago at Hatherall House. Lady Hatherall asked me not to defeat Lord Eversley too decisively. Clarissa stared. You never told me. I was embarrassed. Did you underplay? Aunt Mary looked directly at her. Yes. Clarissa's disappointment must have shown, because her aunt's expression tightened. I'm not proud of it. Why did you agree? Because I told myself it was only a game. Because Gertrude made refusal sound graceless. Because I was tired of being called contrary. The answer struck Clarissa with painful familiarity. Did my father ask anything afterward? Not of me, but he mentioned Eversley's satisfaction for months, as though it proved the quality of his connections. Clarissa looked down at her notebook. If this becomes public, I won't hide your part. I know, even if it embarrasses you. Especially then. Aunt Mary gave a tired smile. You're not the only woman who has mistaken silence for peace. By the 12th November, Clarissa had enough to see the structure clearly. Not enough for a court. There was no court. No crime she intended to prosecute. What she had was a social pattern. Guests encouraged to soften themselves. Important men leaving pleased. Sir Benjamin later invoking proximity to the Duke. Decisions altered by people who believed they were responding to Stoneleigh's wishes. That afternoon, a note arrived from Westacre Hall. It was brief, proper, and addressed through Aunt Mary's household. Alfred wrote that he had confirmed independently that he had never authorized Sir Benjamin to represent his private card-table opinions as ducal approval. He added only one question. Did Clarissa wish him to say so publicly now? She read the sentence twice. Then she wrote back, Not yet. Please keep the sealed packet where it is. I am asking witnesses whether they wish to speak for themselves. His reply came before dusk. Understood. I will wait. No persuasion. No declaration that she was being foolish. No sentence designed to remind her what his rank could accomplish. Clarissa folded the note and placed it beside her writing case. She missed him then with an intimacy that surprised her, not his protection, his attention. The way he had begun to leave room for her answer before deciding what the room required. Aunt Mary entered, carrying an invitation on a silver tray. This arrived from Hatherall House. Clarissa opened it. The wording was elegant. Sir Benjamin and Lady Hatherall requested the honor of Miss Hatherall's presence at a family reconciliation dinner on the 20th November. Near the bottom, Gertrude had added in her own hand that His Grace the Duke of Stoneleigh was expected to attend. Clarissa read the line again. Alfred had made no such promise to her. Aunt Mary saw her expression. What? My father is doing it again. Doing what? Clarissa handed her the invitation, using Alfred's presence before he has agreed to give it. Aunt Mary's face hardened. Clarissa looked toward the small desk where her notebook lay beside the green silk purse. I don't need witnesses who'll say I was perfect, she said. I need witnesses who'll say what actually happened. On the 14th of November, Alfred came to Aunt Mary's house without flowers, gifts, or any object that might turn apology into courtship before either of them was ready to call it that. Clarissa noticed the absence immediately. He arrived with a calling card, a sober expression, and the peculiar restraint of a man who had decided in advance not to improve the scene with charm. Aunt Mary received him in the front drawing-room and remained nearby with a basket of mending, though she chose a chair far enough from the hearth to give them the privacy allowed by good sense and open doors. Clarissa had spent the morning rereading the invitation to Hatherall House. The wording had grown more offensive with each reading. Family reconciliation. His Grace expected, as if Benjamin could still spend Alfred's presence before receiving it. When Alfred entered, Clarissa rose. "Your Grace, Miss Hatherall." He stopped before the chair opposite hers. "May I sit?" The question was ordinary. The fact that he asked made it less so. "Of course." He sat. For several seconds neither spoke. Aunt Mary drew her needle through linen with exaggerated concentration. Alfred finally said, "Your father has done it again." Clarissa looked at him. "You know about the invitation." "I received one yesterday. Then he did invite you." "Yes, after implying to you that I was already expected." His mouth tightened. "That distinction appears to be a habit." Clarissa rested her hands in her lap. "Will you go? If you want me there, and if I don't, then I won't." The answers came without performance. She believed him. That made what she needed to say next more difficult. "I think I do want you there." Alfred studied her. "Why?" "Because my father uses your absence and presence equally well. If you don't come, he'll say you preferred not to be associated with me. If you do come and speak too soon, he'll say you have taken my side because of personal feeling." Alfred gave a short, humorless laugh. "He has arranged a very efficient trap. He has had practice. Then what do you propose?" Clarissa looked toward the window. The garden beyond was grey and stripped nearly bare. "I have Mrs. Denning. Mr. Harbury, Aunt Mary." At the last name, her aunt's needle paused, then continued. "Not all of them know every part," Clarissa added. "That matters. I don't want a chorus. I want people to say only what they certainly saw or heard." Alfred nodded. "Good, and I want the red case brought back under seal. It remains in the steward's strong box at Westacre. Both seals are intact. No one has opened it. No one. Not even you." Alfred's brows lifted, "Especially not me." Something in Clarissa loosened. He had the power to open nearly any door in his own house, and had chosen not to open the one that mattered most, because the integrity of the truth required restraint. "Thank you. Don't thank me for doing what I said I would do." "Then I'll note it without gratitude." A flicker of his old wit appeared. "That sounds dangerously like approval." Clarissa almost smiled. Almost. Alfred saw the unfinished expression and let the humor fade. "There is something else I came to say." She waited. His gaze moved briefly toward Aunt Mary, then returned to Clarissa. "I have been thinking about what you told me in the carriage, about my silence, about mine." Clarissa frowned. "You were not silent." "No, I was worse, in a different direction." He leaned forward slightly, forearms resting on his knees, the posture stripping away some of the distance imposed by rank without trespassing on propriety. "I liked rooms where I was always right." Clarissa said nothing. "Not consciously. At first, I told myself I valued efficiency. I told myself people trusted my judgment. I told myself hesitation was weakness because I had watched indecision damage Westacre under my father." His jaw tightened. "But there is another truth. Agreement was pleasant. Deference was pleasant. Being the man whose opinion ended the discussion was pleasant." Clarissa held his gaze. "Pleasant things are often the hardest to examine." "Yes," he gave the word without defense, "and I made disagreement expensive." The sentence settled between them. Aunt Mary's needle stopped again. "This time she did not pretend otherwise," Alfred continued. "Not with threats, not deliberately, but with impatience, with wit, with that expression I apparently wear when someone takes too long to disagree with me." Clarissa could not help it. "You have several." Alfred's mouth twitched. "I feared as much." Then his face became serious again. "Benjamin exploited a weakness I was proud of. I cannot blame another man for discovering the door if I spent years leaving it open." Clarissa's first instinct was to soften the judgment. She resisted it. That does not make you responsible for what he chose to do. No, but it makes you responsible for whether you continue making the same kind of room. Yes. He answered so quickly that she knew he had already reached the conclusion before coming. Clarissa looked down at her hands. Responsibility is only useful if it changes behavior. I know. Do you? I am trying to. He paused. I asked my secretary yesterday whether he had ever withheld disagreement because of my temper. Clarissa looked up. What did he say? He asked whether I wanted the polite answer. That startled a laugh from her. Real laughter. Small, but impossible to take back. Alfred stared at her as though the sound had struck him somewhere unguarded. Clarissa felt warmth rise into her face. And then he gave me a list. A long one, humiliatingly organized. You trained him well, Alfred exhaled, and the rueful humor in his face made him look younger. Then the laughter faded, leaving something more vulnerable behind. I don't want you to become another person who has to decide whether telling me the truth is worth the cost. Clarissa's throat tightened. Then do not make the cost your affection. Alfred became very still. She had not intended to say affection. The word had escaped because everything else between them had begun orbiting it without permission. He did not seize on it. That mattered. I'll try not to. His voice was quieter now, but I may fail sometimes. Then I'll tell you, even if I dislike it. Especially then. Alfred looked at her with an openness she had never seen in him at Hatherall House. And if you are wrong, Clarissa raised her chin, then you may enjoy the rare privilege of saying so. His smile returned, but it did not hide him this time. It illuminated him. Clarissa felt the distance between them differently than she had before. Not as danger, as choice. Alfred did not move closer. He did not reach for her hand. He did not ask forgiveness as payment for honesty. He simply remained where he was, carrying the discomfort he had named. Something in Clarissa yielded. Not caution, not judgment. The part of her that had spent years believing closeness required surrender. She rose. Alfred stood immediately, confusion crossing his face. Clarissa stepped toward him. You asked nothing from me. No, good. Before she could lose courage, she closed the remaining distance and put her arms around him. Alfred went still. For one heartbeat, he did not touch her at all. The pause was so distinct that Clarissa understood it as a question. She tightened her arms slightly. Only then did his hands settle gently against her back. No urgency, no possession. He held her as though the embrace belonged equally to both of them and could end the moment she wished. Clarissa closed her eyes. His coat smelled faintly of cold air and clean wool. Beneath her cheek, his breath changed once, sharply, before becoming steady again. Clarissa, he said softly. This time he did not correct himself. She drew back first. Alfred released her immediately. His expression held more than he said, but he did not name it. Clarissa was grateful. The confession waiting between them deserved a moment freer than this one. Aunt Mary resumed Sois with suspicious force. I believe, she said without looking up, that the south wall of my drawing room remains structurally sound. Clarissa stepped away, cheeks warm. Alfred looked toward the ceiling, as though seeking divine assistance and finding none. Your aunt is formidable. She's been waiting years for someone to notice. The humor eased them back into the room, but the embrace remained present between them, quiet and undeniable. Clarissa picked up the invitation from the small table and held it out. I'm going. Alfred took the card, but did not unfold it. Then so am I. On one condition. Name it. Speak last. He looked at her. No wounded pride, No question of why a duke should wait behind lesser voices. Just detention? Gladly. Clarissa nodded. And the sealed packet? It will go only when you request it. I am requesting it. Then I'll have the steward carry it himself, still sealed, on the 18th or 19th. You may choose which. Clarissa considered the timing. The 19th? I don't want it in my father's house overnight. Agreed. He placed the invitation back on the table. Anything else? Clarissa looked at the man who had once entered her father's dining room, believing silence proved he had won the argument. Yes, Alfred waited. Come to my father's dinner, but speak last. His gaze held hers, gladly. By the 18th of November, Sir Benjamin had transformed a family reconciliation dinner into something perilously close to a public judgment. Clarissa learned it from 3 separate directions before noon. Mrs. Denning sent a note asking whether she was still expected to attend now that the Harburys had been invited. Mr. Harbury himself wrote that Sir Benjamin had described the evening as an opportunity to put regrettable misunderstandings to rest. Then Aunt Mary returned from a morning call with the final piece. Your father has invited the Carters, the Denhams, and Mrs. Bell, she said, removing her gloves with unusual irritation. Mrs. Bell has not crossed your father's threshold since Easter. Clarissa looked up from the small writing desk. Why now? Because she repeats everything she hears before the tea has cooled. Clarissa leaned back. On the desk before her lay the names of the witnesses who had agreed to attend. Aunt Mary, Mrs. Denning, Mr. Harbury, no one else. She had refused to turn the evening into an ambush. Even when another acquaintance offered a story about Gertrude instructing a gentleman to lose gracefully, the account was vague, second-hand, and useful only if Clarissa wanted noise instead of proof. She did not. Then he wants an audience, she said. He wants witnesses to your apology. Aunt Mary's mouth hardened. Lady Hatherall has apparently told at least 2 people that you intend to acknowledge you were overwrought at Westacre. Clarissa felt anger rise, but it came cleanly now. Weeks earlier, it would have left her shaking. Today, it sharpened thought. I never said that. No, and Alfred never agreed to support their account. Aunt Mary looked at her over the edge of her spectacles. Clarissa noticed the look and sighed. His Grace. I said nothing. You did not need to. That is becoming a family talent. Despite herself, Clarissa smiled. Then she turned back to the list. Mrs. Denning will speak only to what Gertrude asked her to do. Mr. Harbury will speak to what my father represented afterward. You will speak to your own experience. I will speak first, and His Grace last. Aunt Mary nodded. Good. The packet is still at Westacre. Alfred's steward is bringing it tomorrow, still sealed. It will not remain here overnight before the dinner. Also good. Clarissa closed the notebook. The structure mattered. Everything mattered. No surprise witnesses. No secret evidence. No document conjured from nowhere. If the truth could not survive without theatre, then it was not the truth she wanted. Alfred arrived shortly after 3 for a proper call. Aunt Mary received him and, after tea, announced with suspicious innocence that the gardener had asked Clarissa's opinion about a damaged border near the south path. He did no such thing, Clarissa said. He might have. Aunt Mary. Her aunt raised one brow. You have both spent a month discovering the moral importance of exact language. Consider this my contribution. Alfred looked down to conceal a smile. I'm beginning to understand where Miss Hatherall acquired her courage. Not from me, Aunt Mary said. I learned mine late. The garden was cold but dry. Clarissa wore a dark green pelisse and gloves. Alfred walked beside her at a distance no reasonable observer could call intimate, while Aunt Mary remained visible through the drawing-room windows, and an elderly gardener worked near the far wall. For several moments they spoke only of the dinner. Alfred confirmed what Clarissa already suspected. "Your father sent me another note this morning. What did he say?" "That my presence would reassure everyone that the matter had been exaggerated." Clarissa stopped. "And what did you answer?" "That I would attend." Her stomach tightened. Alfred continued before she could misunderstand. "I said nothing about reassurance." "Good. I was tempted to write more." "How much more?" 3 pages. She looked at him. "That would have been unlike you." "My secretary said the same thing, though less kindly." They resumed walking. Bare branches shifted above them in the November wind. "He is using your attendance already," Clarissa said. "I know. Then if you arrive, every person in that room will assume you have chosen a side before I speak." "Probably." "Does that trouble you?" Alfred glanced at her, less than it once would have. "Why?" "Because I no longer believe the room's first conclusion has to be my final reputation." Clarissa felt the words more deeply than he could have known. "That is inconveniently mature. Please don't spread it about." "I have an image to maintain," she laughed softly. Then the seriousness returned. "Tomorrow the steward brings the packet." "Yes, he will carry it himself from Westacre. The seals will remain untouched. You may inspect them when he arrives." "I do not want to inspect them alone." Alfred nodded at once. "Aunt Mary, and perhaps Mr. Harbury, if he is already here." "Agreed. And at dinner, I speak before anyone examines the cards." "Agreed. If my father tries to turn the evening into an apology, before I begin, you do nothing." Alfred's expression changed slightly, but he nodded. "Agreed. If Gertrude accuses me again, you still wait." "Clarissa." She looked at him. It was the first resistance she had heard. "What?" "There may be a point where waiting becomes cowardice." "There may." "Then how will I know?" The question stopped her more effectively than an argument would have. He was not asking permission to dominate the room. He was asking how to recognize the boundary she wanted. Clarissa considered. "If anyone prevents me from speaking at all, intervene. If anyone threatens a witness into silence, intervene. If the argument is merely cruel, let me answer it, even if I hate hearing it, especially then." Alfred breathed out slowly. "You are asking an arrogant man to practice restraint under hostile conditions." "I thought you enjoyed difficult games." "Only when I was allowed to win." She gave him a look. His mouth curved, then he sobered. "Very well, you speak first. I speak last." They reached the end of the path where a stone bench stood beneath a leafless lime tree. Neither sat. The cold had sharpened the afternoon, but Clarissa barely noticed it. "There is one more thing," Alfred said. His voice had changed. The deliberate lightness was gone. Clarissa turned toward him. "What? Whatever happens tomorrow, I will not decide what your words mean for you." The sentence landed quietly. No grand vow. No promise that he would save her reputation. Something better. "Thank you. And I will not call your silence innocence, merely because I care for you." Clarissa's breath caught at the phrase. "Because I care for you." Alfred saw the reaction and did not retreat behind wit. "Nor will I allow your father to call it cheating, because that is convenient to him. That is what I want." "I know." They stood in the brittle stillness of the garden. Clarissa became aware of how close he was, though neither had moved improperly nearer. She remembered his hand over hers at Westacre, his palm open in the carriage, the embrace she had chosen 4 days earlier. Each moment had asked something different of her: trust, choice, courage. This one felt like recognition. Alfred's gaze lowered briefly to her mouth, then returned to her eyes. He did not move. "May I kiss you?" The question was quiet enough that no one beyond the path could hear. Clarissa felt no fear in it, no obligation, no urgency created by scandal. Tomorrow might damage her reputation further. Tomorrow might expose her father before half the county. But this did not belong to tomorrow. It belonged to them. "Yes," she said. Alfred remained still for one heartbeat, as if giving her time to change her mind even after the word. Clarissa did not. She stepped forward and closed the remaining distance herself. His hand rose only after she did, settling lightly against her upper arm. The kiss was brief, warm, and careful. No demand, no triumph. When they parted, Alfred's forehead nearly touched hers before he checked the impulse and gave her space. Clarissa was the one who smiled first. "You look surprised." "I am." "Did you expect me to contradict you?" "I had prepared for the possibility." "How exhausting. You have no idea." She took one measured step back, restoring the proper distance before they returned toward the house. The intimacy remained, but it did not consume the purpose waiting ahead. Alfred glanced toward the drawing-room windows, where Aunt Mary had very deliberately turned her chair toward the fire. "Your aunt has remarkable faith in shrubbery. She has remarkable faith in me." They walked toward the house. At the door, Alfred stopped. "Tomorrow, then. Tomorrow. Your witnesses, your order. Your words first." Clarissa held his gaze. "And yours last." "I remember." For the first time since her father's invitation arrived, she felt no need to rehearse every possible attack. The evidence would come from Westacre under seal the next day. The witnesses had chosen to speak. Alfred had agreed to wait, and Clarissa, who had once believed courage meant speaking when no one else dared, was beginning to understand something harder. Sometimes courage meant choosing the room, choosing the truth, and trusting the man beside you not to take either away. On the 20th November, Clarissa returned to Hatherall House not as a daughter seeking permission to come home, but as a woman who had chosen exactly what she meant to say inside the room that had once taught her silence. The sealed packet arrived with Alfred's steward shortly before the dinner party. The previous afternoon he had brought it to Aunt Mary's residence, so Clarissa, Aunt Mary, and Mr. Harbury could inspect the wrapping without opening it. Alfred's seal and Sir Benjamin's seal had both been intact. The steward had then returned it to Westacre and kept it there overnight, as Clarissa's had requested, rather than leaving it under her father's roof. Now he carried it directly into Hatherall House and placed it under his own supervision until the company withdrew to the card room. Nothing had been altered. Nothing had been secretly examined. Nothing depended upon anyone trusting Clarissa merely because she said so. Dinner began with 15 people and an atmosphere of manufactured forgiveness. Sir Benjamin had seated Alfred prominently enough that every guest could see him. Gertrude wore the serene expression of a hostess confident that social order would soon restore itself. Mrs. Denning sat near Aunt Mary. Mr. Harbury looked as though he would have preferred a battlefield to the soup course. Clarissa sat halfway down the table, neither hidden nor honored. Alfred had greeted her with no greater intimacy than propriety allowed. Only his eyes had told her that he remembered everything. He had promised to speak last. Sir Benjamin rose before the final course had entirely disappeared and lifted his glass. To restored understanding. Several guests followed automatically. Clarissa did not. She placed her glass on the table. The faint sound against the wood was enough. Then we should begin by understanding what actually happened. Sir Benjamin's smile vanished. Gertrude sighed, as though Clarissa had disappointed her by refusing a generous peace. Must we do this during dinner? You invited witnesses to a reconciliation, Clarissa said. I assumed you wanted them to know what they were reconciling. Her father's face hardened. Clarissa. For years, I knew that certain guests in this house were encouraged to flatter important men. I was asked to play below my ability. I complied once, perhaps twice, when I was younger and willing to call dishonesty courtesy, because the alternative was being called difficult. No one moved. Clarissa kept her hands still beneath the table. Later, I refused. I also saw pinprick marks on cards kept in a red Morocco case. I never saw who made those marks. I never saw anyone knowingly read them during play. I never used them to cheat. But I knew enough to understand that something about those evenings was false. Gertrude leaned back. So we have returned to your confession. Clarissa looked at her. Yes, my confession is that I stayed silent longer than I should have. You see, Gertrude turned toward the room. She admits it herself. It proves my silence, Clarissa said. We are here to discover what you did with it. Sir Benjamin put down his glass. Enough. No. Clarissa's voice did not rise. You taught me for years that the room belonged to whoever possessed the greatest authority. Tonight, I am asking only that facts belong to the people who witnessed them. She looked toward Mrs. Denning. Mrs. Denning, will you say what you agreed to say? The widow drew a breath. Lady Hatherall asked me on 2 occasions not to press important guests too hard at cards. On the last occasion, His Grace was one of the players. Gertrude smiled thinly. A harmless social kindness. Perhaps, Mrs. Denning said. But it happened. Clarissa turned to Aunt Mary. Her aunt's expression was pale but steady. I was asked 2 years ago to let Lord Eversley win more comfortably, Aunt Mary said. I obeyed. I was ashamed afterward, which is why I never told Clarissa until last week. Sir Benjamin made an impatient gesture. Women have been gracious at cards since cards were invented. Then let us leave cards for a moment, Clarissa replied. Mr. Harbury. Harbury swallowed. Sir Benjamin told me that His Grace regarded a local subscription arrangement favourably. He referred to possesses the Duke's particular confidence. I withdrew an objection because I believed opposing the proposal might mean opposing Stoneleigh. Sir Benjamin stared at him. I never ordered you to do anything. No, Harbury said. You made me believe I already knew what His Grace wanted. Clarissa felt the room shift. Not dramatically, more dangerously. People were beginning to distinguish influence from command. There are other examples, she said. But I will not use people who have not agreed to speak. These are enough to establish the pattern. Gertrude gave a brittle laugh. A pattern? Then perhaps we should finally see the terrible cards upon which all this moral theatre depends. Clarissa nodded. Yes. Alfred's steward stepped forward. The packet was brought into the card room after dinner, where the company gathered around the long table. The paper remained unbroken. 2 impressions of wax showed clearly upon it. Alfred's signet, Sir Benjamin's signet. Sir Benjamin looked at his own seal and could not deny it. Are those the seals placed at Westacre on the 4th? Clarissa asked. Alfred answered only that question. Have they been broken? No. Sir Benjamin said nothing. The steward cut the cord. The wrapping opened. Inside lay the same red Morocco case. Gertrude had carried into Westacre Hall with her own hand. Clarissa did not touch it. The steward opened the clasp. The pack lay inside. Several backs showed the small repeated pinpricks Clarissa had described weeks earlier. Gertrude folded her arms. And what exactly does that prove? By itself, Clarissa said. Only that the marks exist, that you brought this case to Westacre, and that you acknowledged it belonged to Hatherall House. It does not prove I marked anything. I have never said you did. Gertrude's certainty faltered. Clarissa continued. The cards are not the entire case. They are the visible part of a larger habit. Guests were taught to believe important men were pleased with them. Important men were taught to believe everyone admired them. My father later treated that apparent intimacy as social credit. Sir Benjamin's voice sharpened. I cultivated acquaintances. Every gentleman does. Did you tell Mr. Harbury that His Grace viewed the subscription favourably? I conveyed an impression. Did His Grace authorize you to do so? Silence. Clarissa did not look at Alfred. Not yet. Hospitality makes a guest comfortable, she said. It does not manufacture his admiration and spend it afterward. Gertrude turned suddenly toward Alfred. Your Grace, surely you see the absurdity. You enjoyed those evenings. You enjoyed winning. If we are guilty of vanity, then so are you. Every eye moved to him. Alfred had waited. He had allowed Clarissa to speak, allowed the witnesses to own their words, allowed even Gertrude to make the accusation without interrupting. Now he rose. Yes, Gertrude blinked. Alfred looked around the room. I enjoyed being agreed with. I enjoyed winning. I enjoyed entering rooms where my opinion appeared to settle every question. I told myself that was respect. His gaze moved briefly to Clarissa. It was sometimes fear, sometimes convenience, sometimes flattery. Sir Benjamin exploited my vanity, but he did not invent it. No one laughed. Alfred turned to Sir Benjamin. You did not have my authority to represent private supper conversation, card-table remarks, or acquaintance with me as ducal endorsement. You do not have it now. From this evening forward, no one is to understand any private association with me as patronage unless I have expressly given it. Sir Benjamin's face had gone grey. Your Grace, I never intended. Intent does not alter what others were led to believe. Alfred's voice remained controlled. I have had to learn that myself. That was the true reversal. He did not crush Benjamin with rank. He limited his own. The room understood it. Gertrude looked around as though expecting society to rescue her. But the very people whose approval she had managed now knew the management had existed. Clarissa felt no triumph, only relief that truth no longer required her to pretend she had been flawless. Later, after the guests had departed and Aunt Mary waited in the adjoining room, Clarissa stood alone for a moment beside the drawing-room fire. Alfred entered quietly. Are you all right? I think so. She looked at him. You spoke last. I can be trained. Do not become unbearable about it. He smiled, then lost the smile almost at once. Clarissa, there is something I've been trying not to say before tonight. Because I didn't want it to become another influence over your decision. Her heartbeat changed. Alfred came no closer. I thought at first that I wanted you because you were the only woman who dared tell me I was wrong. That was vanity too. Clarissa's breath caught. I love you because you tell the truth even when it makes you look worse, and because you allow me the same obligation. I love your courage. I love your restraint. I love that you would rather leave a story unfinished than finish it falsely. His voice softened. Clarissa, I love you. She crossed the small distance between them and took his hand. Alfred's fingers closed around hers. And I love you, Alfred. The relief in his face was so unguarded that she nearly laughed and cried at once. Then, he said, May I ask? No proposal tonight. He stopped instantly. Clarissa smiled. You may court me if you like." Alfred stared at her for one astonished heartbeat. Then the old wit returned, gentled by everything that had changed. "I should like that exceedingly." Clarissa tightened her fingers around his. For once, neither of them needed to win. By the first week of December, Clarissa discovered that courtship was far stranger than scandal. Scandal had demanded decisions. Courtship demanded patience. Alfred called at Aunt Mary's house with the regularity of a man determined not to confuse devotion with possession. He came in daylight. He sat where Aunt Mary could see him. He asked Clarissa questions and, to her astonishment, sometimes disagreed with the answers. The first time it happened, she stared at him. "You think I'm wrong?" Alfred considered. "I think you're magnificently wrong." Clarissa narrowed her eyes. "And yet you seem pleased." "I have spent years being deprived of this experience. You lost at whist the first evening we met. That was different. Cards cannot look disappointed in me." Aunt Mary made a choking sound over her tea. Courtship continued through December and into January with no attempt to turn affection into repayment. Alfred did not speak of rescuing Clarissa from her family. He did not offer money to Sir Benjamin. He did not promise to restore Gertrude's standing if Clarissa accepted him. When he asked for Clarissa's opinion, he listened even when it required him to change a plan. When she was wrong, he told her without cruelty. Once, after an unnecessarily sharp disagreement about the management of a tenant petition, Clarissa went silent. Alfred noticed at once. "Have I made disagreement expensive again?" he asked. The old Clarissa would have said no to preserve peace. She looked at him instead. "A little," Alfred exhaled. "Then I owe you a better argument, not a worse temper." It was not perfection that mattered. Perfect men learned nothing because there was nowhere for them to go. Alfred was simply a man who had begun recognizing his worst habit before it became everyone else's burden. Sir Benjamin's consequences unfolded less dramatically and more thoroughly. He remained at Hatherall House, but the easy implication of Stoneleigh's support was gone. 2 introductions he had expected never materialized. A gentleman who might once have accepted his recommendation without question asked instead whether the Duke had put the opinion in writing. Sir Benjamin found the question insulting. Society found it prudent. Gertrude remained Lady Hatherall and continued receiving calls, but her card evenings lost their particular attraction. Guests who once laughed too readily now watched one another with faint suspicion whenever she encouraged someone to play more gently. No one accused her of marking the cards, because no one could prove she had. No one forgot, however, that she had carried the red Morocco case into Westacre Hall and publicly used it to accuse Clarissa. The marked pack itself remained at Westacre under secure custody and was never returned to play. Clarissa did not return to live at Hatherall House. She visited her father twice before Christmas. Both visits were short. On the second, Sir Benjamin said, with visible difficulty, "You have made your point." Clarissa answered, "I wasn't trying to make a point. I was trying to make a boundary." He did not understand entirely, but he did not order her home. For the moment, that was enough. In the middle of January, Alfred asked Clarissa to walk with him in Aunt Mary's winter garden after luncheon. Frost edged the box hedges, and the sky had the pale brightness of a cold English afternoon. Aunt Mary remained visible through the drawing-room windows, though Clarissa suspected she had arranged the distance with mathematical precision. Alfred stopped near the stone bench where he had first asked permission to kiss her. "I have a question," he said. "You usually do. This one is less philosophical. Clarissa's pulse changed. Alfred reached into his coat, then stopped before producing anything. No ring yet. She blinked. No. I thought perhaps I should ask, before arriving with evidence, that I had already decided your answer. Clarissa laughed softly. That is alarmingly sensible. I have been practicing. His expression became serious. Clarissa, I do not want a wife who agrees with me. I do not even want a wife whose chief occupation is correcting me, though I fear you may enjoy it. Occasionally. I want you, the woman who tells the truth when it costs her, the woman who admits when she has failed, the woman who left a house rather than allow silence to be renamed obedience. He took one breath. Will you marry me? Clarissa did not answer immediately. She let herself feel the freedom of the moment. No debt waited behind it. No scandal demanded repair. No father had arranged it. No duke had presumed consent. Alfred stood before her and waited. Yes, she said. His face changed so completely that she wished she could preserve the expression somewhere permanent. Yes, you may stop looking astonished. I was prepared for a speech. I can provide one if you insist. No, I have learned to recognize mercy. The banns were read on 3 successive Sundays. They married in the parish church in early February 1819, with Aunt Mary in the first pew and Sir Benjamin present, despite a stiffness that suggested surrendering a daughter by her own choice, was an experience he had never anticipated. Gertrude attended in proper dignity. There was no theatrical reconciliation. Clarissa preferred truth to ceremony, even on her wedding day. When she left the church, she was Clarissa Balfour, Duchess of Stoneleigh. Yet the story did not end beneath church bells. A week later, at the first small married supper, Clarissa and Alfred hosted at Westacre Hall. 12 guests gathered around a table where disagreement no longer required courage as proof of worth. After dinner, they moved to the drawing room for cards. The servants brought out a fresh pack, ordinary, unmarked, still crisp from its paper. Clarissa placed her mother's frayed green silk card purse beside her scorecard. Alfred noticed it and smiled. Your mother is supervising me again. She would have found you exhausting. I should have liked her. You say that because she cannot contradict you. On the contrary, I suspect she has delegated. Clarissa dealt. The game was close. Alfred played well. Clarissa played better. On the final hand, he misjudged a lead and lost the rubber by a single trick. The room paused. Only half a heartbeat, but Clarissa felt the old habit in it. Guests waiting to see whether the Duke required disappointment to become someone else's fault. Alfred looked at the score, then at Clarissa. One guest stiffened. Clarissa raised a brow. Your play? Alfred sighed. Cruel woman. He laughed genuinely. The room relaxed. 5 minutes later, Mr. Harbury contradicted Alfred over a proposed alteration to a county road. The old Alfred might have answered before the man finished. The new Alfred listened, frowned, and said, I think you're mistaken. Harbury did not retreat. I don't believe I am, Your Grace. Silence threatened again. Alfred looked toward Clarissa. She said nothing. She would not reward him for behaving like an adult. His mouth twitched. Then we shall inspect the figures tomorrow. Conversation resumed. Nobody froze. Nobody rushed to declare the Duke correct. Nobody lost their place in the room. Beneath the edge of the card table, Alfred turned one hand palm up. Clarissa saw it. She remembered the first time he had done that in the carriage, when the gesture had been an offer rather than a claim. She threaded her fingers through his. He closed his hand around hers. The losing score remained visible between the candlesticks. The fresh cards lay scattered across the green baize. Her mother's silk purse remained frayed at the drawstring, exactly as it had been. Nothing needed to be repaired into perfection. When the final guests had gone and Westacre settled into winter quiet, Clarissa found Alfred still beside the card table. "You are brooding over the score," she said. "I am studying injustice. You lost honestly. That is the worst kind." She stepped closer. "You know, there was once a time when everyone would have pretended you won." Alfred looked at her. "I know. Do you miss it?" He considered the question with exaggerated seriousness. "Not nearly as much as I expected." Clarissa smiled. Then she rose on her toes and kissed his cheek before he could ask permission for anything at all. Alfred turned toward her, surprised. She placed both hands lightly against his coat. "That was my idea. I had gathered. Good." His hands settled gently at her waist, waiting. Clarissa leaned into him of her own accord. Alfred bent and kissed her softly, the affection familiar now, chosen and returned. When they drew apart, he touched his forehead to hers. "I love you," he said. Clarissa's fingers tightened in his coat. "And I love you." On the table beside them lay the evidence of an ordinary evening. Unmarked cards, an honest loss, a frayed green purse, and a score no one had altered to protect a powerful man. At Westacre Hall, that was enough.